From San Francisco, it's Grumpy Old Doc with Dr. Gene Bede.
Hello, this is Dr. Gene Bede, and welcome to Grumpy Old Doc. Hey, want to save $20 billion of healthcare expenses? I'm going to share with you how we could do that. I'll come back to how I calculated the $20 billion, and I know someone out there is going to do the quick back-of-the-envelope math and say, hey, we're spending $3 trillion on healthcare, $20 billion, big deal. That's only 0.6% of the overall healthcare costs. Well, to paraphrase the Illinois senator when I was growing up, Everett Dirksen, $20 billion here, $20 billion there. It'll start to add up. Well, how would you get the $20 billion in savings? Eliminate direct-to-consumer advertising. DTC, direct-to-consumer advertising. All those countless ads for drugs that you see on your television. And who wouldn't want to get rid of some of them? It used to be that only political ads would saturate the airwaves, and there was some respite between elections. Nowadays, the political ads are worse than ever, plus we have this plethora of drug ads invading everything from our football game to our news programs. United States and New Zealand are the only two countries in the world that really allow this. Brazil is sort of making some steps in that direction. Brazil obviously has a lot of issues. New Zealand sort of did it by accident. They just never mentioned direct-to-consumer advertising when they were regulating these sorts of communications way back in 1981 when there really wasn't any direct-to-consumer advertising, and there wasn't for a while until 1997 when the United States relaxed its regulations on direct-to-consumer advertising. And then you can understand things took off in New Zealand as well. So how's it going? Well, I think you will realize a little of how it's going when you realize that both the AMA has called for the banning of direct-to-consumer advertising and the doctors in New Zealand. So what's the story? Well, in New Zealand, advertising is supposedly regulated by the Ministry of Health to make sure it's fair and balanced. In the United States, that role is to be served by the FDA. What's the upside? Why did they relax these regulations? Ostensibly, the cover story is it will give people more information about their options for treatment, and so folks that might be underdiagnosed will see, hey, I probably have this and there's a treatment, and they'll come forth. Or people that might have been undertreated and not aware of certain options could go and be a little more activist to find out if it was right for them. And the FDA was to make this information fair and balanced to people. Why fair and balanced? Well, that's why it's a good thing, because it's giving you simply information. Even though it's called advertising, the idea is that it would be informational, which is why you hear that horrific list of complications after each and every drug that's advertised on television. Of course, my favorite is, tell your doctor if you live in an area where certain fungal infections are common. Oh man, does that raise a lot of questions in my mind. First of all, certain fungal infections. Exactly which fungal infections and exactly which areas are these things common? And which areas is it common for certain fungal infections to exist? And for me to have a disease where a popular medicine is a problem with them, and my doctor's not going to be aware of fungal infections in the area in which he practices, and I have to tell him about it. It's just ridiculous from the beginning to the end. But remember these two goals, that it's fair and balanced and that it's informational to patients and people who are having conditions that perhaps should be treated with drugs. Oh, by the way, the pharmaceutical companies spend $5 billion a year on direct-to-consumer advertising. So where does that $5 billion come from? How is that calculated into what they say is the high cost of research and many drugs that fail, and that they have to charge a really high price because of that? Is some of that high price going for $5 billion a year of direct-to-consumer advertising? not to worry, the drug companies tell us, that what they're doing is increasing their sales so they can lower their costs. And they maintain that for every dollar they spend on direct-to-consumer advertising, they make $4 back in increased sales, a 4-to-1 return on investment. That's where I get the $20 billion figure from, folks. If they're spending $5 billion and they say there's a 4-to-1 return on investment for them, $20 billion extra is being spent in the healthcare space simply because of direct-to-consumer advertising. Can it ever really be fair and balanced? The drug companies, they have a duty to their shareholders to boost sales. They do that, and they do that with a number of tactics that tend to not inform, but to misinform people. First of all, they exaggerate the benefits of the drug, and they minimize the risks of the drug. And they can do this in a number of ways. They can do it by having a model for Stelara march across the screen with beautiful skin from head to toe, while somebody mutters or they have fine print with all the side effects. Another example of this was Cymbalta, an antidepressant that also got approval to treat fibromyalgia and certain chronic pain syndromes. Nice print ad showing a woman with knee pain, and Cymbalta is going to help her live a more active lifestyle. Where are the side effects? They're tucked away among some other ads on the other side of the page. It's hard to know what long-term safety will look like for a drug. You can't tell what will happen when 10 million people take a drug for 10 years by studying it in 1,000 people for 2 years. You just simply don't know. So some of the direct-to-consumer advertising has been for products that have subsequently been removed, or they've had serious problems. Vioxx comes to mind. Zelnorm, another one. Slightly different the way it was advertised, not by the drug companies, but by practitioners, Fen-Phen. All of these, and purple crack I mentioned the other day, all of these things did not become apparent until time had passed. And yet, as time had passed, there were a lot of patients asking for these drugs because they had seen commercials for them saying, ask your doctor if this is right for you. One study of direct-to-consumer advertising done back in 2013 found that about 60% of ads did one or another of these tactics. They left out important information, they presented opinion or testimonial as fact, and they made a meaningless association between their drug and lifestyle. Another study, breaking down the claims made in direct-to-consumer advertising, said 43% of these claims are true, 55% are potentially misleading or misleading, and 2% were outright false. So let's look at these various categories of the way direct-to-consumer ads manipulate us. I'm going to give you a first example, a drug called Trexamet. Trexamet is perhaps the most cynical approach to marketing a drug that I've seen in my lifetime. Trexamet is the drug that followed on Imitrex. And you can already see they didn't even bother to come up with a new name. They just exchanged the syllables in their existing one. So what was Trexamet? As Imitrex came off patent, they looked to replace some of those branded drug sales, which they knew would go away, with a new drug that was branded called Trexamet, which was a unique proprietary combination of Imitrex, the drug that's now generic, and voila, naproxen, which is Aleve. Okay, so not exactly revolutionary, and it's pretty clear what they're doing in trying to extend the product life cycle of Imitrex. But what they also didn't do is list all those nasty complications that NSAIDs give you. Most notably GI bleeding. Ostensibly, you could take the purple crack because somebody's bundling that with another drug as well. Give you some other examples, some of the growth factors that are used, and they're very good things for improving quality of life and reducing hospitalization, and they have all sorts of wonderful benefits, but these are growth factors used for people with serious side effects from chemotherapy. For some cancers, using those growth factors really decreases their chance of survival. And as doctors evaluate whether they should use those growth factors, one consideration is whether they think this person has a chance to survive. And pretty much some of these cancers, you should only use these growth factors where you really don't think the person's going to survive. You're just going to extend their life and perhaps improve the quality of their life. I don't see that in any of these commercials. That's a pretty serious thing. I don't see doctors talking about it with their patients either. I'll give you another example that kind of crosses both of these lines. Anybody remember Latisse and Brooke Shields putting this stuff on her eyelashes, making them ever more beautiful? Some of the things they neglected to tell you about Latisse is that it could harm your cornea, result in an infection. It could permanently change the color of your eyes. It could cause hair to grow elsewhere, ostensibly in a place that wasn't desired. And this crosses the line here between personal opinion and celebrity endorsement. Brooke Shields. So the second tactic they talk about is substituting opinion for personal facts. So you got Brooke Shields, you got Magic Johnson. Magic Johnson comes on TV and tells folks that Kaletra, his HIV drug, can help most or all people. Even though the studies pretty much say about a third, 37% of people, it really isn't beneficial for them. I guess 63% is most or all. It's most, not all. It's one or the other. But man, that seems misleading. That seems to misinform people. Not to mention the golfers with psoriasis, the models, all of this sort of taking the place of real reasoned decision-making. Ask your doctor if you can be a golfer or a model or a basketball star. And then there's the lifestyle associations that are subtle in the drugs. Early DTC was pretty crass about it. An anti-allergy medicine that would enable you to climb a mountain. My friends in primary care were deluged with people who were going rock climbing and they wanted a prescription for this antihistamine because they thought it had something to do with motion sickness or balance or something else like that. They pretty much got rid of it. They even made fun of it a little bit. I don't know if you guys remember the Flomax commercials where they had these old guys taking this medicine for their prostate gland and they're going through the rapids on kayaks on this rapidly flowing stream, stopping occasionally at a restroom. Now we've got this nonsense of the Farsiga shuffle, all these people dancing around to a Dire Straits song, making type 2 diabetes looking like the most fun there's been since the ice cream cone was invented at the St. Louis World's Fair. Even worse, the drug companies, they invent these conditions. These poorly understood syndromes become a more definitive condition under the tutelage of drug companies and the experts that they convene. And not incidentally, they have a product that seems to provide some relief to this poorly understood syndrome. And the product is generally even more poorly understood, including its long-term side effects. You have an overactive bladder. Well, I get to be treated by a sight of some poor woman being followed around in her daily activities by a distended bladder. There's a product for that. They don't really say that the product, on average, means one less trip to the bathroom a day, and there's mounting evidence that it increases your risk for dementia. Doesn't seem to be fair and balanced to me. Even where this sort of syndrome thing is real. I'm thinking of our opiate crises and opioid-induced constipation. Today, 2 drug company sales executives pleaded guilty to violating the anti-federal kickback scheme in selling narcotics. Everybody knows we have an opiate crisis in this country. The drug companies are the ones that profit from it, as well as the doctors, the pill pushers who prescribe. But nevertheless, opioid-induced constipation, by golly, wink, wink, nod, nod, slap your knee. It's something you can be a man and be working, be on some nice, strong opioids, and get a pill so you're not constipated from it. How is this serving the public or informing them? 81% of doctors in one study say they feel DTC has led to over-medication. Another example. One class of drugs, psychotropic drugs, drugs that affect your thinking, psychiatric drugs, some neurology drugs. Depression, very underdiagnosed, particularly back in 1997 when DTC was allowed. And so it'd be a good thing if people became aware of the signs of depression and got treatment for it before some bad outcome hits them. So I'll grant you that. But let's examine this class of psychotropic drugs, which are used for a variety of psychiatric and mental issues, developmental problems. So under direct-to-consumer advertising, 5